The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with alien voices as Ambassador Ryan Collins walked to the center podium. His black suit looked plain next to the colorful robes and armor of the other species. The Zentaurians, with their blue skin and crystal eyes, watched him with cold interest. The tall Andromedans whispered among themselves while their leader, Senator Zix Mora, tapped her clawed fingers on the metal desk. Ryan had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Every word of his speech had been chosen carefully. Every fact had been checked dozens of times. This was humanity's last chance to gain equal standing in the galaxy they had served for nearly 200 years. "Honored council members," Ryan began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he carried. "I come before you today not to ask for charity or special treatment. I come to request what any species deserves after 2 centuries of loyal service. Equal representation in this council and an end to the laws that treat humans as second-class citizens." Prime Minister Velkoth of Zentauri leaned forward. His blue face showed no emotion as he spoke. "Ambassador Collins, your species has contributed much to our civilization. We do not deny this. However, humans remain unpredictable. Your people solve problems with violence first and diplomacy second. How can we trust such a species with greater power?" Ryan felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice calm. "With respect, Prime Minister, humans have fought in every major conflict to defend this confederation. We have explored the most dangerous regions of space. We have built colonies in places other species deemed impossible to survive. If this is violence, then perhaps the galaxy needs more of it." Murmurs spread through the hall. Some aliens nodded in agreement, but more shook their heads or made gestures of disapproval. Senator Zix Mora stood up, her tall frame casting a shadow over Ryan's position. "The human speaks of exploration and colonization as virtues," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "But we remember the wars humans brought to Earth before they reached the stars. We see how quickly they resort to weapons when faced with problems. This is not the behavior of a mature species ready for true leadership." Captain Jake Morrison watched the proceedings from the observation deck above. He had commanded human ships for 20 years and seen things that would give these politicians nightmares. His crew aboard the Liberty had fought off 3 separate attacks from unknown raiders just last month while protecting a Zentaurian trade convoy. The thanks they received was a formal complaint about using excessive force against the attackers. Down. In the council chamber, Dr. Lisa Grant was preparing to speak. She had requested time to present her research about signals detected from the outer rim of the galaxy. Her findings troubled her deeply, but she hoped they might convince the council that humanity's military nature served a purpose. "Council members," Dr. Grant said as she activated her data display, "my team has been monitoring ancient predecessor sites across the galaxy for 15 years. 6 months ago, we detected energy signatures unlike anything in our records. These signals originate from beyond our galaxy's edge, in the void between star systems. The holographic display showed wave patterns and energy readings that meant nothing to most of the audience." Dr. Grant pointed to specific peaks in the data. "The predecessor ruins contain automated systems that have been dormant for millions of years. These systems are now activating in response to something approaching from deep space. The pattern suggests a systematic awakening, as if something is testing our defenses." Prime Minister Velkoth waved a dismissive hand. "Dr. Grant, your reputation as a scientist is well known. However, this sounds like human paranoia. The predecessors vanished long ago. Their technology is beyond our understanding, yes, but that does not mean invisible threats lurk in empty space." "The readings are clear," Dr. Grant insisted. "Something is coming. The predecessor warnings speak of entities that consume not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of reality itself. If I am correct, the galaxy may need every defender it can find." Senator Zix Mora laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Now we see the true human nature, always searching for enemies to fight, always convinced that violence is the answer to every problem. This is exactly why your species cannot be trusted with greater authority. Ryan felt the moment slipping away. The vote would be called soon, and he could see the decision in the aliens' faces. 2 centuries of human sacrifice and service meant nothing to them. They saw only what they wanted to see. "The vote is called," announced the council secretary. "All in favor of granting humans equal representation and removing discriminatory restrictions." 12 hands rose out of more than 200 council members. All opposed. The forest of raised hands made Ryan's heart sink. "The motion fails by overwhelming majority," the secretary declared. "The current status of human membership remains unchanged." Ryan gathered his papers with steady hands despite the rage building in his chest. He had one more duty to perform before leaving this chamber forever. "Council members," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "You have made your decision. History will judge whether it was wise." 3 days later, Admiral Kate Sullivan sent the coded message that would change everything. The signal went out to every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. The message was simple: come home. Within 72 hours, humanity vanished from galactic civilization without a word of explanation or farewell. Commander Zechtel stared at the empty space where New Tokyo Station used to orbit the mining world of Kepler 442b. The massive station had housed 50,000 humans and served as the primary refueling point for ships traveling the outer rim. Trade routes. Now there was nothing but scattered debris and the faint energy signature of departed vessels. "Sir, we've completed the scan of the orbital zone," reported his second officer. "No life signs, no distress beacons, no indication of what happened to the station itself." Zechtel had been investigating human disappearances for 3 weeks now. Every human facility his team visited showed the same pattern. The humans had left completely, taking not just their people, but somehow managing to remove entire structures that had been built into asteroids and planets. "How does a species make a space station simply vanish?" he muttered to himself. The communication officer turned from his station. "Commander, we're receiving a priority message from Admiral Tex 9. All investigation teams are ordered to return to Central Command immediately." 6 hours later, Zechtel stood in the briefing room aboard the flagship Eternal Justice with 20 other commanders. Admiral Tex 9 looked older than his 400 years as he addressed the assembled officers. "The situation is worse than we initially believed," the Admiral began. "The humans didn't just leave. They systematically removed critical components from infrastructure across the galaxy. Power grids are failing, communication networks are experiencing blackouts, and 3 major trade routes are now completely unsafe to travel." Chief Engineer Nix Duel activated a galactic map that showed failing systems in red. Nearly 30% of the galaxy was marked with warning indicators. "The humans had integrated their technology into our systems far more than anyone realized," Nix Duel explained. "They volunteered for dangerous assignments and remote postings that other species avoided. While we thought they were simply doing grunt work, they were actually maintaining critical systems that kept our civilization running." Senator Morvash from the Draconis system raised his clawed hand. "Surely we can repair these systems ourselves. How difficult could it be to replace human modifications?" Nix Duel's expression darkened. "That's the problem, Senator. We're discovering that many of these systems were never meant to work without human involvement. The humans didn't just maintain existing technology, they redesigned it from the ground up, often in ways that require specifically human neural patterns to operate." Commander Zechtel stepped forward. "Are you saying the humans sabotaged our infrastructure?" "Not sabotaged," the engineer replied. "Improved. But improved in ways that made us dependent on their continued presence. Power plants that were supposed to last 50 years have been running efficiently for 2 centuries because of human modifications. Sensor networks that should have failed decades ago still function perfectly because humans found ways to boost their capabilities." Admiral Tex 9 gestured to another section of the display. The outer rim monitoring stations have gone completely dark. These installations were our early warning system for threats from beyond the galaxy. Without them, we're essentially blind to anything approaching from deep space. The mention of deep space threats made several officers uncomfortable. Most of them remembered Dr. Grant's warnings about signals from the void, warnings that the Council had dismissed as human paranoia. "Sir," asked Commander Yeltox of the Andromedan fleet, "have there been any attempts to contact the humans? Perhaps we could negotiate their return in exchange for better treatment." The Admiral's expression grew grim. "We've been broadcasting on all known human frequencies for 2 weeks. No response. Our deep space sensors show no trace of human ships anywhere in the galaxy. It's as if they never existed." On the planet Arcturus 7, former human mining operations had ground to a halt when automated systems began rejecting commands from non-human operators. The Zentaurian replacement crew had tried for days to restart the quantum extractors that pulled rare minerals from the planet's core. "The machines respond to our commands initially," reported Chief Mining Engineer Cole says. "But after a few hours, they shut down with error messages we cannot understand. The diagnostic systems seem to be looking for specific biological signatures that only humans possess." Similar reports came in from across the galaxy. Agricultural stations that fed billions stopped producing food. Manufacturing plants that created everything from starship components to medical supplies ceased operation. Even basic life support systems on some worlds began experiencing mysterious failures. The crisis deepened when long-dormant archaeological sites began showing activity. Dr. Cole Wem, the galaxy's leading expert on predecessor civilization, was called to investigate energy readings coming from ruins on 12 different worlds. "The sites are responding to some kind of signal," he reported to the Emergency Council session. "Predecessor, technology that has been inactive for millions of years is suddenly coming online. The energy patterns match what Dr. Grant detected before the human departure." Senator Zixmora looked pale despite her usual composed demeanor. "What kind of signal could activate technology that old?" "According to the translations we've managed, it appears to be a warning system," Dr. Colwem replied. "The few predecessor texts we can read speak of watchers and guardians who must maintain constant vigilance against threats from the void between galaxies." The pieces began falling into place with horrible clarity. The humans had not been simple laborers and soldiers. They had been maintaining systems and monitoring threats that the rest of the galaxy never even knew existed. Prime Minister Velkoth, who had led the opposition to human equality, now found himself in emergency session with otherworld leaders. The infrastructure failures were causing economic collapse across multiple systems. Worlds that had relied on human-maintained technology were experiencing power shortages, communication blackouts, and transportation breakdowns. "We must find a way to bring them back," declared Senator Jex Nor from the Pegasus colonies. "Our pride is not worth the collapse of galactic civilization." But their attempts at contact met only silence from the void where humanity had vanished. The species they had dismissed as too violent and unpredictable had proven themselves indispensable in ways no one had imagined. As the weeks passed and systems continued failing, the true scope of human integration into galactic society became clear. They had not been conquerors or even partners. They had been the unrecognized foundation upon which everything else was built. And now, as ancient warnings echoed from predecessor ruins and unknown signals stirred in the darkness between stars, the galaxy faced its future without the guardians it had never known it needed. Dr. Cole Wem had spent 30 years studying predecessor ruins, but he had never seen anything like what was happening now. Ancient machinery that had been silent for millions of years hummed with energy on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. The archaeological team on Kepler 186f worked frantically to decode messages appearing on crystalline displays that had been dark since before the first Zentaurian learned to use tools. "The translation matrix is still incomplete," reported his assistant, Dr. Yinael. but we're getting consistent patterns. The predecessors left these systems as a warning network, something designed to activate when specific conditions were met. Colwem studied the flowing script that appeared and disappeared on the ancient screens. The predecessor language was incredibly complex, each symbol containing multiple layers of meaning that changed based on context and timing. "What kind of conditions?" he asked. "The departure of the Watchers," Yin Aiel replied, her voice quiet, with growing understanding. According to these messages, the predecessors established a guardian system before they vanished. They chose a species to monitor threats from beyond the galaxy and maintain the containment protocols. The implications hit Colwem like a physical blow. The humans. The humans were the Watchers. Meanwhile, in the outer rim of the galaxy, Fleet Admiral Tex 9 commanded a hastily assembled task force investigating energy signatures that had appeared in previously empty space. The readings were unlike anything in Confederation databases, showing massive distortions in space-time itself. "Admiral, sensors are detecting something at the edge of our scanning range," reported the science officer aboard the flagship Determination. "The energy signature is enormous, but it doesn't match any known technology or natural phenomenon." On the main view screen, space itself seemed to be twisting and folding in impossible ways. Stars in the background flickered and dimmed as if something was passing between them and the watching fleet. "Launch probe drones," Admiral Tex 9 ordered. "I want full spectrum analysis of whatever is out there." The probes crossed the vast distance at maximum speed, their sensors recording everything they encountered. When the data began streaming back, the bridge crew fell silent with horror. "Admiral," the science officer said, his voice shaking, "the probes are detecting ships, massive ships, but they're not made of any material we recognize. The hulls appear to be constructed from collapsed matter and negative energy. The largest vessel is over 50 kilometers long. Are they responding to our communications?" the Admiral asked. "Sir, they're not responding because they're not alive. According to these readings, the ships are basically mobile holes in reality. They're consuming energy and matter from everything around them, including space itself." As they watched, one of the probe drones simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, but literally erased from reality as if it had never been built. "All ships, retreat to minimum safe distance," Admiral Tex 9 ordered. "Get me a direct line to Central Command, Priority Alpha." Back on the research world where Dr. Colwem worked, the ancient AI construct Harmony 7 had finally activated after millions of years of dormancy. The artificial intelligence had been left by the predecessors as a final failsafe, designed to provide guidance if the Guardian system ever failed. The AI's voice filled the research chamber, speaking in perfect translation, despite using concepts that barely existed in modern languages. "The Devourers wake from their slumber in the void," Harmony 7 announced. "The species you call predecessors did not simply vanish from this galaxy. We were consumed by entities that exist in the spaces between realities. These beings feed on the fundamental forces that hold the universe together." Dr. Colwem leaned forward, desperate for answers. "How did you stop them before?" "We did not stop them. We could only slow their advance and contain them in the void, between galaxies. The effort required our entire civilization and ultimately led to our extinction. Before the final battle, we established monitoring systems and chose successor species to maintain the containment." "The humans," Colwem said. "Correct. Humans possess the specific genetic and psychological traits necessary to interface with our technology. Their aggression and adaptability make them ideal guardians against threats that would drive other species to madness. For 2 of your centuries, they have maintained the barriers that kept the Devourers dormant." The AI paused, and when it continued, there was something like sadness in its artificial voice. "The departure of the human Watchers has begun the awakening sequence. Without constant maintenance, the containment barriers weaken, The Devourers sense opportunity and emerge from their prison between the stars. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as other predecessor sites activated. The message was always the same. An ancient enemy had been contained by a system that required human maintenance, and now that humanity was gone, the galaxy faced extinction. On Zentari Prime, Prime Minister Velkoth received reports that made his blood freeze in his veins. The energy signatures detected at the galaxy's edge were moving. Multiple massive contacts were heading toward inhabited systems at speeds that should have been impossible. "How long until they reach our space?" he asked his military advisors. General Kex Tal consulted the tactical displays. "At their current rate of approach, the first wave will reach the outer colonies in 18 standard days. The entities appear to be following established trade routes, which suggests they have some form of intelligence guiding them." Senator Zix Mora, who had been instrumental in rejecting human equality, now found herself in the position of begging for solutions no one had. "Can we contact the humans? Can we bring them back to help us face this threat? We've been broadcasting on all frequencies for weeks," replied Communications Chief Dorheck. "No response from any human source. Our long-range sensors show no trace of human ships anywhere in known space. They appear to have left the galaxy entirely." The bitter irony was not lost on anyone in the room. The species they had dismissed as too violent and unpredictable had been the only thing standing between them and cosmic extinction. Reports began flowing in from the first systems to encounter the Devourers. The mining colony on Sigma 7 simply stopped transmitting. When rescue ships arrived, they found empty space where a planet had been, not destroyed, not exploded, but completely absent as if it had never existed. The rescue teams detected residual energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Reality itself seemed unstable in the area where Sigma 7 had been, with instruments showing readings that violated known laws of physics. "They don't destroy matter," reported Captain Nelvos after witnessing the aftermath. "They unmake it. They consume the very concepts that allow things to exist. Fighting them with conventional weapons would be like trying to shoot mathematics." As panic spread across the galaxy, the true scope of the crisis became clear. The humans had not simply been maintaining technology and monitoring for threats. They had been holding back an enemy that could literally erase reality itself. And now, with the Guardians gone, the Devourers were free to consume everything the galaxy had ever known or dreamed of becoming. The first major system to fall was Kepler 442, home to 12 billion Andromedan colonists. Captain Ben Murphy watched from the bridge of the cloaked human vessel Wanderer as reality itself unraveled around the system's 3 inhabited worlds. The Devourers didn't attack in any conventional sense. Their massive ships simply moved through space, and wherever they passed, existence followed different rules. Stars flickered and changed color. Planets developed impossible geometries that hurt to observe. Space stations folded in on themselves in ways that defied three-dimensional thinking, recording all sensor data, reported Lieutenant Sarah Mason from her station. "Command will want complete documentation of Devourer tactics." Murphy nodded grimly. The Wanderer was one of dozens of human ships maintaining hidden observation posts throughout the galaxy. They had been watching and waiting for 3 months since the Exodus, knowing this day would come. "Sir, we're receiving distress signals from the surface of Kepler 442b, the communications officer announced. "The Andromedans are requesting immediate evacuation assistance from any human vessels in the area." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew the irony of the moment. 3 months ago, these same Andromedans had voted to keep humans as second-class citizens. Now they begged for human help as their world dissolved around them. "Maintain communications silence," Murphy ordered, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. "Our orders are clear. Observe and document only." On the planet below, Andromedan civilians scrambled for escape ships as the laws of physics began breaking down. Buildings aged centuries in minutes, while others reverted to their component atoms. The very air became hostile, with some regions showing negative density that made breathing impossible. Admiral Lisa Parker watched similar scenes unfold from the command center hidden within the Crab Nebula. The facility existed partially outside normal space-time, protected by technology that humanity had spent decades perfecting in secret. Around her, dozens of analysts tracked the Devourer advance across multiple fronts. The Outer Rim colonies are completely gone, reported Colonel Frank Nelson. 18 systems have been completely unmade in the past week. The Devourers are following predictable patterns, targeting high-energy sources first. Any signs that the Confederation forces can slow them down? Parker asked. No, ma'am. Standard weapons have no effect whatsoever. The Zentorian Third Fleet engaged a Devourer ship near Arcturus and simply ceased to exist when their energy weapons made contact with the enemy hull. The feedback somehow propagated back through their own weapon systems. President Sam Tucker materialized via hologram, his image transmitted from the massive generation ship Hope's End. The ship housed nearly 10 million humans and served as the mobile capital of humanity in exile. Admiral, I need your assessment of the current situation, Tucker said without preamble. Parker activated the galactic display, showing Devourer positions in pulsing red. Nearly 40% of the galaxy's outer regions were already lost. The Confederation is in complete chaos, Mr. President. They have no effective weapons against the Devourers and no understanding of what they're facing. At the current rate of expansion, the enemy will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Tucker's expression was grim. And our preparations? The new weapon systems are ready for deployment. Dr. Frank White's team has successfully modified predecessor technology to create weapons that can affect the Devourer's exotic matter composition. However, the weapons require human neural patterns to operate effectively. What about the containment plan? Tucker asked. Theoretically sound, but it would require enormous sacrifice. The predecessor barrier system needs constant energy input from a psychically active species. Based on Dr. White's calculations, containing the Devourers would require the life force of approximately 2 billion humans channeled through the modified barrier generators. The weight of that number hung in the air between them. 2 billion lives to save a galaxy that had never shown humanity anything but contempt. Mr. President, Admiral Parker continued, there's something else you need to know. We've been monitoring Confederation communications. They're finally starting to understand what the humans were doing all those years. On Centauri Prime, the emergency session of what remained of the Galactic Council was reaching desperate conclusions. Prime Minister Vel Koth looked decades older as he read reports from the front lines. The pattern is undeniable, he announced to the assembled leaders. The humans were not simply maintaining our technology. They were operating systems specifically designed to contain these entities. Every human facility that we thought was unnecessary or redundant was actually part of a galaxy-wide defense network. Senator Zix Mora's usual composure had cracked completely. The mining operations, the remote monitoring stations, even the human settlements in supposedly worthless systems, they were all strategic positions in a containment grid that we never recognized. The revelation was devastating in its implications. For 2 centuries, the species they had marginalized and dismissed had been secretly protecting the entire galaxy from a threat beyond imagination. Sir, interrupted communications. Chief Dorheck, we're receiving a transmission. It's on human frequencies, but the signal is heavily encrypted. All eyes turned to the main display as the message appeared in flowing human script. To the species of the Galactic Confederation, you have witnessed the enemy our ancestors warned us about. You have seen what happens when the Guardians abandon their posts. We do not send this message to gloat or to demand apology. We send it because the threat extends beyond this galaxy. The message continued with technical data about Devourer capabilities and the scope of the danger they represented. According to human calculations, if the entities were not contained, they would eventually break through into neighboring galaxies, spreading across the entire universe like a plague of non-existence. The predecessor containment system can be reactivated, the message continued. But it requires a sacrifice that we alone must make. The question before you is simple. Do you want us to save the galaxy that rejected us? President Tucker faced the most difficult decision in human history as he stood before the Human High Council aboard Hope's End. Representatives from every surviving human colony and ship had gathered to vote on their species' fate. "We have the power to save them," Tucker said, his voice carrying across the vast assembly hall. "Our ancestors accepted the role of guardians because someone had to stand watch against the darkness. The question is whether we continue that duty even for those who never appreciated it." The debate that followed was passionate and painful. Some argued that humanity owed nothing to species that had treated them as inferior. Others insisted that allowing universal extinction would make humans no better than the entities they fought. In the end, it was Dr. Lisa Grant, now ancient but still sharp, who cast the deciding argument. "We don't do this for them," she said, quietly. "We do this because it's who we are. We are the ones who stand between civilization and the dark. That doesn't change because civilization failed to understand us. The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would return to save the galaxy that had never wanted them as equals." As the human fleets began emerging from their hidden positions, the galaxy would soon learn what it truly meant to have guardians who would sacrifice everything to hold back the night. Admiral Jack Stone felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders as the massive human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system. 50,000 ships materialized from the void, their hulls gleaming with modifications that no other species had ever seen. These vessels existed partially outside normal space-time, making them visible but untouchable by conventional sensors. "All ships report ready status," announced Captain Mary Ross from her position at the tactical station. "The Devourer task force is maintaining position around Vega Prime. Estimated strength, 12 major vessels and approximately 40 support craft." Stone studied the tactical display with practiced eyes. The Devourers had been consuming the Vega system for 3 days, methodically unmaking 4 billion Centaurian colonists, along with their cities, infrastructure, and eventually the very matter that composed their world. "This is Admiral Stone to all fleet commanders," he broadcast across the human formation. "Remember your training. These entities exist partially outside our reality. Standard physics don't apply to them, but they're still bound by certain universal constants. Target their anchor points and maintain minimum safe distance from their reality distortion fields." The human ships began their approach in formations that would have seemed impossible to other species. Individual vessels phased in and out of normal space, appearing to occupy multiple positions simultaneously. The Devourers, for the first time since their awakening, encountered opponents who could match their ability to manipulate reality. Dr. Frank White coordinated the attack from his position aboard the command ship Guardian's Light. The modified predecessor weapons hummed with energy that hurt to be near, their exotic matter components resonating with frequencies that existed only in theoretical mathematics. "Weapons are charged and ready," he reported to Admiral Stone. "Remember, these systems require human consciousness to operate effectively. The predecessors designed them to interface with our specific neural patterns. All ships, commence firing." "Sequence," Stone ordered. The human weapons released energy that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Where the beams struck Devourer vessels, reality reasserted itself with violent force. The enemy ships, which had seemed invulnerable to conventional attack, began showing signs of damage as their exotic matter hulls destabilized. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers faced an enemy that could hurt them. But the victory came at a price. Each shot from the modified predecessor weapons drained life force from the human crews operating them. Men and women aged years in minutes as they channeled their very existence into the weapons systems. Colonel Mary. Ross led ground teams to the surface of planets where devourer influence had begun warping reality itself. Her soldiers wore armor that existed in multiple dimensions, allowing them to navigate areas where normal matter had become unstable. "This is Team Alpha reporting." Ross's voice crackled over the comm system. "We've reached the primary predecessor facility on Vega Prime. The containment systems are heavily damaged but still functional. Beginning repairs now." The work was deadly. Areas affected by devourer presence didn't follow normal rules. Gravity might flow upward, time could run backward, and solid matter might decide to exist as pure energy without warning. Only human adaptability and their ability to interface with predecessor technology made the mission possible. "Colonel, we're detecting massive energy buildup from the devourer ship in orbit," warned her technical specialist, Sergeant Bill Cooper. "They're targeting our position." "Acknowledged," Ross replied, continuing her work on the ancient control systems. "All teams maintain position. We need 15 more minutes to complete the repairs." The devourer weapon struck the planet's surface with force that should have atomized everything within 1,000 kilometers. Instead, the energy passed through the human soldiers without effect. Their armor's dimensional phasing technology kept them slightly outside normal space-time, making them immune to attacks that targeted conventional matter. Above them, Admiral Stone's fleet continued its desperate battle. Human ships flickered in and out of existence, striking the devourers from angles that shouldn't have been possible. The enemy responded by trying to drag the human vessels into pocket dimensions where they could be unmade more easily. "Guardian's Light is taking heavy damage," reported Captain Sue Allen. "Hull sections are aging at accelerated rates. We're losing structural integrity across decks 7 through 12. Stone watched his ships sacrifice themselves one by one. Each vessel destroyed took hundreds of human lives, but every minute of delay allowed the ground teams to complete more repairs. To the containment system. "All remaining ships implement Protocol 7, he ordered. "Full commitment to target Alpha." Protocol 7 meant ramming speed. The surviving human vessels began direct collision courses with the largest devourer ship, their crews knowing they would not survive the impact. But as each ship struck the enemy vessel, the modified predecessor technology in their hulls created reality anchors that forced the devourer to exist fully in normal space. The massive enemy ship, suddenly vulnerable to conventional physics, began tearing itself apart under the strain of existing in a single dimension. Dr. White watched the readings from his position in the command center. "It's working. The devourer command ship is destabilizing. But Admiral, we're detecting energy signatures from beyond the galaxy. More of them are coming. A lot more." Stone felt the weight of what was required settling on him like a burial shroud. The immediate battle could be won, but the war would require the ultimate sacrifice. "Dr. White, begin activation of the barrier system. Signal all human colonies and ships. It's time." Across the galaxy, humans began connecting to the modified predecessor network, not through technology, but through the willing sacrifice of their life force. 10 billion humans opened their minds to the ancient systems, offering their very existence to power a barrier that would contain the devourers forever. Captain Ben Murphy, still observing from the cloaked wanderer, watched as the reality around Vega system began to stabilize. The chaotic distortions caused by devourer presence faded as normal physics reasserted control. "Sir, we're receiving a general broadcast from Admiral Stone," his communications officer reported. Stone's voice filled the bridge, calm despite the magnitude of what was happening. "To all human vessels and colonies, this is Admiral Stone. The barrier activation is proceeding as planned. The containment field will require constant energy input to maintain. We knew this day would come when we accepted the role of guardians." The broadcast continued with technical details about the sacrifice required. Every human connected to the network would give their life force to maintain the barrier. It was the only way to permanently contain entities that existed partially, outside reality itself. Tell our children to remember us not as conquerors or heroes, but as guardians who did what was necessary. The galaxy will continue because we chose to hold the line one final time. As the barrier took shape around the galaxy's edge, the Confederation species watched in awe and horror. The humans they had dismissed and marginalized were sacrificing their entire civilization to save those who had never respected them. On Centauri, Prime Minister Velkoth watched the energy readings that showed human life signs winking out across the galaxy. Billions of people giving their lives to maintain a containment system that would protect species who had never understood their true purpose. The last transmission came from President Tucker aboard Hope's End as the great ship prepared to join. The Barrier Network. Galaxy of many species, we leave you with this gift. The Devourers are contained, but remember the price that was paid. Remember that those you call monsters sometimes stand between you and true darkness. Remember us not as your conquerors, but as your guardians. And if the universe ever again produces a species willing to stand watch against the night, perhaps show them the respect they deserve before it's too late. The human signals faded one by one until silence filled the void where Earth's children had once called home. The silence that followed humanity's sacrifice stretched across the galaxy like a funeral shroud. Captain Jake Morrison stood alone on the bridge of the Liberty, one of only 300 human ships that had been designated to survive the barrier activation. His crew of 50,000 represented less than 1% of humanity's survivors, kept alive to maintain critical systems that no other species could operate. Status report on the containment field, Morrison requested, his voice hollow in the empty bridge. Lieutenant Kate Adams checked her instruments with mechanical precision, the weight of loss making every simple task feel monumental. Barrier integrity holding at 96%, Captain. The network is stable. The Devourers are completely contained beyond the galaxy's edge. Around them, space itself looked different now. The barrier was invisible to normal sensors, but human instruments could detect the massive energy field that separated their galaxy from the void where ancient horrors waited. 10 billion human minds had given their lives to create and maintain that barrier. Their consciousness now merged with predecessor technology in a way that would last until the stars themselves burned out. Morrison activated the long-range communication system. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Liberty to any Confederation forces receiving this transmission. The immediate threat has been contained. Devourer forces have been pushed back beyond the galactic barrier. Normal space-time has been restored to all affected systems. The response came quickly from Admiral Tex 9 aboard the Confederation flagship Eternal Justice. Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Tex 9. We are detecting massive energy signatures around the galaxy's perimeter. Can you explain what has occurred? Morrison paused before answering. How could he explain that his entire species had just committed collective suicide to save civilizations that had never valued them? Admiral, humanity has activated an ancient containment system left by the predecessors. The Devourers are now permanently sealed outside our galaxy. The barrier will hold as long as human consciousness continues to power it. Captain, we're showing human life signs in several systems. How many of your people survived? Approximately 15 million humans remain alive, Morrison replied. We were kept outside the barrier network to maintain systems that require human operation. The rest of our species now exists as part of the containment field itself, the E. Implications hit the Confederation leadership like a physical blow. Humanity had literally sacrificed themselves out of existence to save the galaxy. The species they had treated as second-class citizens had given up everything to protect those who had never shown them respect. On Centauri Prime Minister Velkoth convened an emergency session of the surviving council members. Nearly half the galaxy's leadership had been killed during the Devourer attacks, and those who remained faced the horrible reality of what their prejudice had cost. The reports are confirmed. announced Dr. Colwem via hologram from his research station. Human consciousness is now permanently integrated with the barrier system. They have essentially transformed themselves into a living wall between us and extinction. The energy reading suggests this barrier will function for millions of years. Senator Zix Mora, who had been one of the strongest opponents of human equality, spoke with a voice barely above a whisper. 10 billion people. They sacrificed 10 billion of their own people to save us. Not just to save us, corrected Dr. Colwem. According to the data the humans provided, the devourers would have eventually broken through to other galaxies if left unchecked. Humanity saved the entire universe, and they did it for species that never acknowledged their worth. The magnitude of human sacrifice became clearer as reports flowed in from across the galaxy. Human facilities that had been maintaining critical infrastructure for centuries now stood empty. The 15 million survivors were spread across 300 ships, trying to keep essential systems running that billions of other beings depended on. Captain Sarah Lewis commanded one of the survival ships, the vessel Endurance, which housed 50,000 of the last humans. Her mission was to maintain the quantum manufacturing plants that produced medical supplies for 6 different species. Without human oversight, the complex systems would fail within months, leaving billions without access to life-saving medicines. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Andromedan Medical Council, reported her communications officer. The message was formal but carried undertones of desperation. Andromedan physiology required specific quantum-stabilized medications that only human-operated facilities could produce. Without these medicines, their entire species faced a slow death from genetic degradation. Please respond that we will continue production as long as we are able, Lewis ordered. But remind them that we now have finite personnel to maintain systems that were previously supported by millions of specialists. Similar scenarios played out across the galaxy. The humans who remained found themselves more valuable than ever, but also impossibly stretched thin trying to maintain civilization for species that vastly outnumbered them. Dr. Frank White, now one of the few remaining human scientists, worked frantically to train alien specialists to operate modified predecessor technology. The task was nearly impossible since the systems had been designed specifically for human neural patterns. The quantum resonance chambers require intuitive thinking that most species cannot replicate, he explained to a class of Zentaurian engineers. Humans developed this capability through millions of years of evolution in chaotic environments. Your species evolved in stable, predictable conditions. Your minds work differently. The bitter irony was obvious to everyone present. The very traits that had made other species consider humans unpredictable and dangerous were the same traits that made them uniquely qualified to operate the technology that kept galactic civilization functioning. On the research ship Discovery, Captain Tom Anderson worked with the survivors of his crew to decode the final messages left by the humans who had joined the barrier network. The process was emotionally devastating, as each decoded transmission was essentially a final goodbye from someone who had chosen to die for the sake of universal survival. "We are receiving coherent signals from the barrier matrix," reported Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's xenopsychologist. "The human consciousness integrated into the system is still aware, still thinking. They're sending us technical data about barrier maintenance and warning us about potential weak points." Anderson felt his throat tighten. His wife had been among those who joined the barrier network. The thought that she was still conscious, still working to protect the galaxy even in death, was almost unbearable. "Record everything," he ordered. "If they're still fighting to keep us safe, the least we can do is make sure their sacrifice isn't wasted." The surviving Confederation government struggled to process the reality of their situation. They had been saved by the very species they had rejected, and now they were completely dependent on the tiny remnant of humanity that remained. Prime Minister Velkoth found himself in the unprecedented position of begging Captain Morrison for human assistance with critical infrastructure repairs. "Captain, 3 of our core worlds are experiencing power grid failures. The systems were modified with human technology over the past century, and we cannot determine how to repair them without human expertise. Morrison's response was professional, but carried an edge of exhaustion. We'll dispatch technical teams to assist, Prime Minister. However, I must inform you that we have only 12,000 qualified engineers remaining to cover the entire galaxy. Response times will be significant. The conversation continued with increasingly desperate requests for human intervention in systems across Confederation space. It became clear that without the 15 million survivors, galactic civilization would collapse within a year. As weeks passed, the full scope of human sacrifice became undeniable. They had not only given their lives to contain the devourers, but the survivors now worked themselves to death, trying to maintain infrastructure for billions of beings who had never appreciated their contributions. The galaxy had been saved, but at a cost that would echo through history forever. The species that had been deemed too violent and unpredictable to deserve equality had proven themselves to be the most selfless guardians the universe had ever known, and now, as the survivors struggled to keep civilization running, the question remained. Would the galaxy learn from this sacrifice, or would history repeat itself when the next guardians were needed? 5 years had passed since the barrier activation, and Captain Jake Morrison felt every day of it in his bones. The Liberty had become a mobile command center for the surviving humans, traveling from crisis to crisis across the galaxy as essential. Systems failed without proper maintenance. His crew of 50,000 had dwindled to 37,000 as exhaustion, accidents, and the simple impossibility of their task took its toll. Captain, we're receiving emergency signals from the Kepler Mining Collective, reported Lieutenant Kate Adams, her face showing the strain of years without adequate rest. Their quantum extraction systems have gone offline. Without human intervention, they estimate total mining shutdown within 48 hours. Morrison rubbed his temples, fighting off another headache. The Kepler Collective supplied rare minerals essential for faster-than-light travel. If their operations shut down, interstellar commerce would begin grinding to a halt within months. Set course for Kepler 442b, he ordered. Signal the Endurance and the Horizon. We'll need their technical specialists for this one. The 300 surviving human ships had been divided into specialized response teams, each responsible for maintaining different aspects of galactic infrastructure. Captain Sarah Lewis and the Endurance handled medical production. Captain Tom Anderson aboard the Discovery managed research facilities and knowledge preservation. The Horizon, under Captain Mike Roberts, specialized in transportation and communication networks. But they were all stretched impossibly thin. Sir, I have to point out that we haven't had shore leave in 18 months, Adams said quietly. The crew is operating on emergency reserves. We're going to start losing people to simple exhaustion if we don't get some rest. Morrison knew she was right, but there was no time for rest. Every day brought new crises, new systems failing, new requests for human intervention. The galaxy that had once dismissed them as unnecessary now couldn't function without them. After we handle the Kepler situation, he promised, knowing it was likely a lie. There would always be another emergency, another system failing, another crisis that only humans could solve. On the research vessel Discovery, Dr. Amy Foster continued her analysis of signals from the barrier network. The human consciousness, integrated into the containment field, had been sending increasingly complex data about devourer behavior and barrier maintenance. But decoding these transmissions took enormous mental effort, and she was one of only 6 humans in the galaxy qualified for the work. The barrier matrix is reporting stress fractures in sectors 7 through 12, she announced to Captain Anderson. The consciousness network is recommending reinforcement procedures, but they require additional human life force to implement. Anderson felt his heart sink. They had known this day would come eventually. The barrier wasn't self-sustaining, it required periodic renewal from living human consciousness. The 15 million survivors represented the only source of compatible energy in the galaxy. How many people would we need to sacrifice to perform the reinforcement? He asked. Foster's calculations were precise and horrible. Approximately 50,000 individuals would need to join the barrier network to restore full integrity. Without reinforcement, we estimate total barrier failure within 50 years. The number hit Anderson like a physical blow. 50,000. People represented more than 3 times the total crew of the Discovery. It would mean asking entire ships to sacrifice themselves to maintain the protection their species had died to create. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the political situation grew increasingly complex. The surviving Confederation government had been forced to completely restructure their society around dependence on human expertise. New laws gave humans absolute authority over any system they had helped build or modify, which turned out to be nearly everything that kept civilization. Running Senator Zix Mora, now serving as acting prime minister after Velkoth's death from stress-related illness, found herself in the unprecedented position of governing a galaxy where humans were simultaneously the most valuable and most vulnerable population. The situation is unsustainable, she announced to the emergency council session. We have 15 million humans trying to maintain infrastructure for 600 billion beings. The math simply doesn't work. Dr. Colwem, participating via hologram from his mobile research station, presented the latest analysis of human population trends. At current mortality rates, we estimate total human extinction within 25 years. They're literally working themselves to death, maintaining our civilization. The irony was staggering. The species that had been deemed too valuable to treat as equals was now so valuable that they were being worked to extinction by the very beings they had saved. We need to begin massive retraining programs, suggested Senator Morvash. Every major species should dedicate significant resources to learning human-modified systems. The problem isn't training, Colwem replied. Most of these systems were designed to interface specifically with human neural patterns. We can learn to operate them, but we can't replicate the intuitive problem-solving that humans naturally possess. When something goes wrong, we need humans to fix it. Captain Morrison received regular updates on the political situation from his liaison contacts within the Confederation government. The species that had once debated humanity's worthiness now fought over access to human technical expertise. Captain, we're receiving a formal request from the Andromedan Council, Adams reported. They're offering to provide military protection for human ships in exchange for priority assistance with their medical production facilities. Similar offers arrived daily from different species and governments. The humans who remained had become the most sought-after beings in the galaxy, courted by civilizations that would have ignored them entirely just 5 years earlier. But Morrison and his fellow captains had learned to be wary of such offers. Protection meant control, and control meant that human technical expertise would be monopolized by whoever was strong enough to claim it. Decline the offer, Morrison ordered. Politely. Remind them that human assistance is provided based on critical need, not political agreements. The decision to maintain independence was becoming increasingly difficult as human numbers dwindled. Several ships had been forced to merge crews as casualties mounted, and the remaining vessels found themselves under constant pressure from various factions seeking to secure human loyalty. Dr. Frank White, now aboard the research vessel Horizon, worked desperately to find solutions to their impossible situation. His latest project involved modifying predecessor technology to accept non-human neural patterns, but progress was frustratingly slow. The fundamental problem is that human consciousness developed under specific evolutionary pressures, he explained to his mixed species research team. Our ability to adapt and improvise isn't just cultural, it's neurological. Other species can learn to operate our systems, but they can't truly understand them. The research was complicated by the fact that every hour White spent on theoretical problems was an hour he wasn't available to solve immediate crises. Like every other human survivor, he was trapped between the desperate need for long-term solutions and the constant demand for short-term fixes. As the 5th anniversary of the human sacrifice approached, Captain Morrison found himself facing the most difficult decision of his life. The barrier reinforcement could no longer be delayed, and the Discovery had volunteered to provide the necessary personnel. 50,000 people, he said quietly, standing alone in his quarters. Half the crew of the Discovery gone to maintain the wall that keeps the Devourers at bay. The communication from Captain Anderson had been brief and formal, but Morrison could read the pain between the lines. Anderson was asking for permission to sacrifice his people because someone had to do it, and he refused to ask another ship to bear that burden. "Captain," Adams's voice came over the intercom, "you're needed on the bridge. We have a situation." Morrison took one last look at the star field outside his window, knowing that decisions made in the next few hours would determine whether humanity survived another generation or finally completed their transformation from living species to eternal guardians. The galaxy depended on them, just as it had for centuries. The only difference now was that everyone finally understood the price of that dependence. 10 years after the human sacrifice, Captain Jake Morrison stood before the holographic display showing the last census of his species. 3,400,000 humans remained alive in the galaxy. The number seemed impossibly small, compared to the 600 billion beings they continued to serve. The barrier reinforcement had proceeded as planned, with Captain Anderson and 50,000 volunteers from the Discovery joining the consciousness network that maintained the containment field. Their sacrifice had bought another 50 years of stability, but everyone knew it was only delaying the inevitable. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Confederation Council," Lieutenant Kate Adams announced. She had aged rapidly over the past decade, as had they all. The constant stress and impossible workload had taken years off every human life. The transmission was from Senator Zix Mora, now elderly and speaking from what appeared to be a hospital bed. The burden of governing a galaxy dependent on a dying species had clearly taken its toll on her as well. "Captain Morrison, I wanted to personally inform you of the Council's decision. We have voted unanimously to establish the Morrison Protocols. Effective immediately, all remaining humans are classified as irreplaceable galactic resources. No human may be asked to perform dangerous maintenance without backup from at least 2 other species. All human technical knowledge is to be recorded and preserved in quantum storage matrices." Morrison listened with mixed feelings. The protection was welcome, but it came too late to save his species. The protocols might extend human survival by a few decades, but mathematics was inexorable. They were dying faster than they could be replaced. Additionally, Zix Mora continued, the Council has approved the Emergency Reproduction Initiative. We are offering full planetary resources to support human population growth, including advanced medical assistance and complete administrative support for any human families. The offer was generous, but Morrison knew it would make little difference. The remaining humans were too scattered, too exhausted, and too dedicated to their guardianship duties to focus on reproduction. Most of them would die at their posts, maintaining systems that kept civilization running. Dr. Amy Foster's research had finally yielded results, but they were not the kind anyone wanted to hear. Her analysis of the barrier network had revealed that human consciousness was gradually being consumed by the effort of maintaining containment. The 10 billion minds that powered the barrier were slowly burning out, their identity fading as they merged more completely with predecessor technology. "We estimate that the original human consciousness will be completely absorbed by the barrier systems within 200 years, she reported to the assembled captains via hologram. After that point, the barrier will continue to function, but it will no longer be powered by recognizably human minds. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just facing physical extinction, but the eventual erasure of human consciousness from the universe entirely. They would become nothing more than energy patterns in an ancient machine, their thoughts and dreams consumed by the necessity of holding back the dark. Captain Sarah Lewis aboard the Endurance had been working on a different kind of preservation project. Her team had been creating comprehensive records of human culture, history, and philosophy, storing everything in quantum matrices that could survive the heat death of the universe. "If we cannot preserve our species," she had told Morrison, "at least we can preserve what it meant to be human. Future civilizations will know that we existed, and perhaps they will understand why we made the choices we did." The Cultural Preservation Project had become increasingly important as human numbers dwindled. Every death meant the loss of irreplaceable knowledge and experience. The survivors were not just individuals, but living repositories of human achievement and memory. Dr. Frank White had finally completed his work on modifying predecessor technology for non-human operation. The breakthrough had come too late to save humanity, but it offered hope for the galaxy's long-term survival. Other species could now operate basic versions of human-modified systems, though they would never match human efficiency. "The irony is perfect," White had commented during his final report. "We spent our entire existence as a species trying to prove we belonged in the galaxy. Now that we're dying, everyone finally understands that they needed us all along." As the 10th anniversary of the Great Sacrifice approached, Morrison made the decision that would define humanity's final legacy. The remaining ships would be consolidated into a single vessel, the New Earth, which would serve as a mobile archive and emergency response unit. The last humans would spend their remaining years training other species and documenting everything they had learned about maintaining galactic civilization. "This is Captain Morrison to all human vessels," he broadcast across the fleet. "We have served as guardians for over 2 centuries. We have sacrificed ourselves to save civilizations that never understood us. But our greatest achievement is not what we destroyed or contained. Our greatest achievement is what we built." The consolidation took 6 months. Humans from 300 ships came together aboard the massive vessel that had been constructed using the last of human engineering expertise. The New Earth was designed to be operated by a crew of just 50,000, using advanced automation systems that could function for centuries with minimal maintenance. "We leave behind a galaxy that can survive without us," Morrison continued, in what would be humanity's final general broadcast. "We have trained your people to operate the systems we built. We have recorded our knowledge for future generations. We have contained the threats that would have destroyed everything you hold dear." The message was transmitted simultaneously to every inhabited world in the galaxy, carrying with it technical specifications, cultural records, and detailed instructions for maintaining the systems that kept civilization running. "To the species that will inherit this galaxy, remember us not as conquerors or heroes, but as gardeners. We tended the systems that allowed your civilizations to flourish. We held back the forces that would have consumed your dreams. We gave everything so that you could continue to reach for the stars." Senator Zix Mora listened to the broadcast from her deathbed, tears streaming down her aged face. She had lived long enough to see the complete reversal of everything she had once believed about humans. The species she had once considered too dangerous to trust had proven themselves the most trustworthy guardians in galactic history. When new threats emerge, and they will emerge, remember what it took to face them. Remember that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those who seem weakest. Remember that those you call monsters might be the only ones willing to fight real monsters. Morrison's final words carried across space to reach every corner of the galaxy. "We do not ask for monuments or memorials. We ask only that you remember the price of prejudice and the value of those who stand watch in the dark. The universe is vast and dangerous, and it will always need guardians. When your turn comes to stand guard, remember us. Remember that duty is not about glory or recognition. It is about doing what must be done, regardless of the cost." The transmission ended with the complete technical specifications for barrier maintenance, detailed cultural archives, and instructions for training future generations in the responsibilities of guardianship. 3 years later, Captain Morrison died at his post aboard the New Earth, working on repairs to a quantum stabilizer that kept faster-than-light communication possible across the galaxy. He was found by his replacement, one of the last humans born in space, surrounded by the tools he had used to maintain civilization until his final breath. The galaxy mourned, not because they had loved humanity, but because they finally understood what they had lost. The species that had been deemed unworthy of equality had proven themselves the most worthy guardians any civilization could ask for. In the end, humanity achieved something that no other species in galactic history had managed. They became truly indispensable, not through conquest or domination, but through sacrifice and service. They gave everything so that others could continue to dream of better worlds. The barrier held. The galaxy survived. And in the quantum matrices where human consciousness had merged with ancient technology, something that had once been human continued to stand watch against the dark, ensuring that the light of civilization would never be extinguished. The last. Transmission from the New Earth was simple and final. Guardianship complete. Thank you for allowing us to serve.